All right, listeners, get ready for this deep dive because today we're looking at how to build the apps and websites of the future.
And whether this platform that everyone seems to be talking about, Supabase, can actually deliver on all that hype.
Now, I'm sure you've heard people calling Supabase this open source Firebase alternative.
With all the promises of building apps in a single weekend and scaling to support millions of users, it almost sounds too good to be true, right?
Well, luckily, we've got our expert here today to help us cut through the marketing and get down to the nitty-gritty.
See if Supabase can really walk the walk.
Now, something that immediately stood out to me on the Supabase website
Was how much they kept mentioning this built-on Postgres thing.
They mention it everywhere like it's some kind of magic word. So for anyone out there who hears database and just kind of nods along.
What's the big deal with Postgres? What does it actually mean in practical terms?
You're asking all the right questions. It's all about understanding the reasons behind the tech jargon, right?
So imagine you're building a house. You wouldn't want to build it on a foundation of sand, would you?
Some platforms, they feel exactly like that shaky ground, always shifting, the rules changing all the time.
But Postgres is different. It's known for being reliable, for having rock-solid data integrity.
So by building Supabase on top of Postgres...
It's like they're saying, hey, this isn't some flimsy thing. We built this to last.
So no more digital house of cards collapsing in the middle of your project.
I like the sound of that. But they also use a lot of jargon on their website, like edge functions.
When I hear that, I just picture some guy in a black turtleneck standing on the edge of cyberspace or something.
What does it actually mean for developers in reality?
It's a great way to put it. So think about building an app where users can upload photos, right?
Usually those photos have to travel all the way to your main server just to get resized, which can take time.
But with edge functions, you can process all of that much closer to the user on servers all around the world.
That way, even if someone's internet connection isn't great, their experience will still be super smooth.
It's all about making your app faster and more responsive where it matters most.
That's slick.
Yeah.
And then there's this other term they mention alongside all this, vector.
Now, I know we're not talking geometry class here, but help me out. What's the deal with vector in this context?
It's like this, remember those CAPTCHA things you see online? Where you have to click on all the crosswalks or whatever to prove you're not a robot?
Behind the scenes, those CAPTCHAs are actually using AI to recognize images.
Well, Vector essentially lets you bring that AI power into your own apps.
So if you want to build an app that can search images based on what's actually in the picture, not just basic keywords.
Vector is your new best friend.
So we're talking about building these next-gen apps with a super solid foundation and even throwing in some AI-powered image searches.
The Supabase thing is starting to sound less like hype and more like the real deal.
But we can't ignore the elephant in the room here, can we? I'm talking about Firebase.
It's basically the biggest name in app development right now.
So is Supabase actually a serious competitor? Or are we comparing apples to oranges here?
That's the million-dollar question every developer is asking themselves these days. And honestly, both platforms have their own strengths.
It's not really about one being better than the other.
It all comes down to what you value most as a developer. What matters to you when you're building something?
Okay, I like that. So break it down for us. What are the key things someone should be thinking about when they're making this decision?
Imagine you walk into two different workshops, right?
Firebase is like this super sleek, all-in-one setup. They give you everything you need, all the tools, the materials, even pre-made templates for building certain features.
Super convenient. You can jump right in and get started super fast.
But you're always kind of working within their system, playing by their rules, you know?
So maybe not as much room for customization or going completely off script. So where does that leave Supabase? What's that workshop like?
Supabase is more like that workshop your friend built in their garage.
It's got that real maker energy. You know, you can see all the raw materials, how everything fits together.
You can even swap out parts if you want, experiment a bit more freely.
More freedom.
Yeah.
But maybe a bit more work up front as well. That lines up with this whole open source thing, right?
You got it. With Supabase, you're not just a user. You can be a collaborator, a contributor.
You can peek under the hood, see how everything works.
You can even add your own code to the project.
That's pretty powerful for some developers, but it can also be a steeper learning curve for others.
Yeah, you've got to be more willing to get your hands dirty, dig into the nuts and bolts a bit more. Now, one thing that everyone knows about Firebase is that it plays super well with all the other Google stuff.
How big of a factor is that in this whole equation?
It really depends. If your entire world revolves around Google Cloud and all their services,
then that tight integration with Firebase is going to be a huge plus.
But for some people, it can feel a bit limiting, like being stuck with one grocery store.
Sure, they might have everything you need most of the time, but what if there's a way better deal on that one specific ingredient somewhere else?
That's where Supabase really shines. It lets you mix and match, bring in tools from other places.
You're not limited to just one ecosystem.
So you've got more flexibility if you're the kind of person who likes to shop around a bit.
Gotcha. Okay, let's talk about the thing that's always on a developer's mind, especially when you're first starting out.
Money. How do the pricing models for Supabase and Firebase actually compare?
Both platforms are actually pretty good for small projects and people who are just trying things out, testing the waters.
They both have these generous free tiers, which is great.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about serious scale, scaling up to a lot of users.
That's when the differences start to really show.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with the details.
Think of Firebase's pricing like a pay-as-you-go phone plan. It's really appealing at first, especially if you're just making a few calls here and there.
But then your app suddenly blows up, goes viral.
Suddenly you're using way more data than you expected.
And bam! That bill at the end of the month is a real shocker.
Supabase, on the other hand, is more like opting for that unlimited data plan.
It's predictable. You know exactly what you're going to pay each month, which a lot of businesses really like, especially as they grow.
It's one less thing to keep you up at night when you're trying to, change the world with your app. Speaking of changing the world,
I did notice that the Supabase website has a ton of these glowing testimonials from developers.
people claiming they built a whole app in a single weekend, doubled their app speed, cut their costs in half.
Is this just marketing fluff? Or is there actually something real behind these stories?
You're right to be a little skeptical. Testimonials are always tricky because people are always going to highlight the good stuff.
But honestly, I don't think they're completely making it up either.
It's more about understanding the context of each story.
Okay, so how do we separate the marketing hype from real valuable insights?
You have to look for the specifics, right?
Anyone can just say, Supabase is amazing, and leave it at that. But what were they actually building with it?
What specific problems did it help them solve? I remember one testimonial in particular.
This developer, Michael C. Dever, he was talking about how he migrated his whole database over to Supabase.
And he was saying that by moving everything over,
he was able to make his app twice as fast.
And cut his costs in half.
Hold on, wait. How do you make something twice as fast and cheaper by just switching to a different database? That sounds like the holy grail that developers spend their entire career searching for.
I know, right? That's the one that really made me do a double take.
He was moving away from this older system, a more traditional setup, and by taking advantage of all the serverless functions that Supabase offers.
It turned out that their architecture was a much better fit for his particular project.
And that's how he was able to get those incredible results in terms of speed and cost savings.
Which actually reminds me of something else I kept seeing over and over in these Supabase testimonials.
It wasn't just about what they were able to build with it,
but also how it felt to build with it.
Ah, you're talking about that elusive developer experience.
That magical land where everything just works and there are no 3 a.m. debugging sessions fueled by coffee and pure desperation.
Exactly. Over and over, developers were raving about how good the documentation is.
How intuitive the API is to work with.
And honestly, the whole community vibe.
Open source projects, they really live or die by their communities.
And it seems like Supabase has gone above and beyond to build a really positive and supportive one around their platform.
Which makes sense. You know what they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Okay, we've definitely covered a ton of ground in this deep dive.
We've got this amazingly solid Postgres foundation, all these cutting-edge features, a clear understanding of the cost differences.
We even talked about the human side of choosing the right platform. So for anyone listening who's thinking, okay, all this sounds great, but should I be building my next project on Supabase?
What's the final word?
The truth is, there's no single answer, no magic bullet that's going to be right for everyone. It all comes back to knowing yourself, knowing your project.
Are you the kind of developer who loves working with SQL databases? Or does even the thought of writing in SQL query make you want to break out in hives?
How important is that open source philosophy to you? Are you excited to be part of a larger community, contribute your own code, be that active participant?
Or would you rather just have the comfort of knowing there's a big company with a clear roadmap behind the platform you're using?
So it's not just about the technology itself.
It's also about figuring out how you want to work, what values are important to you as a developer.
I really like that. But
Yeah.
practically speaking,
Are there any red flags people should be watching out for? When is Supabase not the right choice?
that's a great question. If you need something hyper specific for your project, like a super obscure database feature that only exists on one very niche platform,
Supabase might not be the best fit. Or if you know that your app is heavily reliant on being plugged into another ecosystem, like if you're all in on Google services, for example.
then that tight integration you get with Firebase might be more valuable than the flexibility that Supabase offers.
It's really all about choosing the right tool for the job, even if that means recognizing that sometimes a different tool is a better fit.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And you know what? Even if someone listening to this right now thinks, you know what? Not this time. Supabase isn't the right fit for me right now.
Just the act of exploring these different options, looking at what else is out there, is so valuable in itself.
It pushes you to think differently about your own projects, sparks new ideas, helps you break out of that echo chamber a little bit.
It's true. I'm already thinking about all the cool stuff I could build with this, all the time I could be saving. The possibilities really do seem endless.
And that's what we love to see. That's what makes the tech world so exciting. There's always something new to discover, something new to build.
Absolutely. So, listeners, go forth and build amazing things. And when you do, tell us about it. We want to hear about all your Supabase wins.
Your epic coding fails, whatever you're working on.
We're here for all of it. Until next time, happy coding.